was 7, my dad took me to Florida to visit an old army buddy of his. The guy had a boat and had planned an all-day fishing trip. While my dad and his friend were moving gear from the truck to the boat, I ran up and down the pier with the guy's small dog. I was supposed to stay within sight of the boat, but I just followed the dog wherever it went, not really paying attention to how far I wandered. And at some point, I lost track of where I was. I wasn't panicking or anything. I figured I'd just retrace my steps. But then I saw this man sitting on the back of a sailboat. He was maybe late 30s, early 40s, with tan skin and short dark hair. His boat was really nice, way bigger than the one my dad's friend had. When he saw me, he smiled and said I had a cute dog, then told me I was cute too. I laughed and said thanks, not thinking anything of it. He asked me where my parents were, and I told him I was looking for them. He said I could wait on his boat, that he'd show me around while we waited for them to come looking. I did not even hesitate. I said sure, and he helped me climb aboard. I put the dog down, and he walked me through the boat, pointing out different rooms and features. It was seriously the nicest thing I had ever seen. He told me he had sailed all over the world, showing me framed photos from different places. He talked about the adventures he'd had, and I was completely enthralled. At one point, he took me to the top deck and had me look around for my dad. I spotted him and his friend still unloading the truck, not even aware that I was missing. The man said they didn't seem to have noticed yet, so if I wanted, we could finish the tour before he took me back. I agreed without a second thought. We went below deck, into his private cabin. It was beautiful, filled with pictures and little souvenirs from different places. He sat down on the bed and patted the spot next to him, so I sat too. He kept talking about his travels, about the places he's been and the things he's seen. Then he got quiet for a second before asking if I wanted to go on a real adventure. I did not understand at first, so he explained. He said if I wanted, we could leave right now, just me and him, sailing away. He promised he'd take care of everything, food, clothes, anything I needed. I just had to say yes, and he'd start the engine, and we would be gone before anyone even noticed. For a second, I actually considered it. I remember thinking about my dad, wondering what he'd say when he found out I was gone. I told the man no, because I'd missed my dad too much. He smiled and said that was a good reason. Then he stood up and said he'd take me back. He led me up the stairs, helped me off the boat, and handed me the dog. He waved and told me to have a good day, like we had just finished a normal conversation. I waved back and walked toward the parking lot, where my dad was just starting to look for me. I did not tell him what happened, because, in my mind, nothing bad had really occurred. The guy had been nice. He hadn't hurt me. He let me go. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized what had almost happened. If I had said yes, I don't think I would have ever come back. There was something about the way he said everything was ready, like he had planned for a scenario exactly like this. I don't know what made him let me go, but I think about it a lot. The whole thing, from getting lost to finding my dad, couldn't have taken more than 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes could have changed everything. When I was about 6 years old, my family lived deep in the country, far from anything that resembled civilization. Our house sat on a steep dirt road, with only 3 other homes scattered miles apart. Thick forests surrounded us on all sides, and it was the kind of place where you didn't get visitors, especially not at the back door. One afternoon, I was playing inside when I heard a knock, but it wasn't at the front door, the one people normally used. It came from the back, which led straight out to the woods. That was strange enough to make me stop what I was doing. My parents were in the living room, talking, not paying attention. Curiosity got the better of me, so I walked over and pulled the curtain aside. Standing there on the back porch was a huge man. He had a thick white beard and was dressed in a hunter's outfit, camo jacket, heavy boots. But what froze me in place was the shotgun he was holding. Barrel pointed just slightly downward, not quite at me, but close enough to make my stomach drop. He grinned, and in a deep, almost too friendly voice, he asked, "Hey kid, your parents home?" Something felt off. Even at 6, I knew something was wrong. I did not answer. I just stood there, staring at him through the glass. He took a step forward onto the porch, and I felt my legs lock up. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Then, from behind him, there was a sharp click. The man must have heard it too, because he froze. Slowly, he turned his head, and I looked past him and saw my grandpa standing at the edge of the porch, shotgun raised, finger on the trigger. My grandpa was an old-school country man. He did not say much, but when he did, you listened. And right then, his voice was steady and calm when he said, "Sir, I think you're lost." The hunter hesitated. For a second, I wondered if he was going to do something. Try to talk his way out, try to lunge. Instead, he raised his hands in a slow, exaggerated motion, his shotgun still in one hand, but pointed away now. "Yeah, I think I am," he said. He turned his gaze back to me, smiled again, and this time it did not look as friendly. Then, just as slowly, he started backing away towards the trees. My grandpa did not lower his gun. He kept it trained on the man, watching him take every step until he disappeared into the woods. We never saw him again. My parents came running when they heard my grandpa's voice, but by then, the man was already gone. I remember my grandpa telling them, "Keep the doors locked," in that same even tone. He did not even act rattled. He did not try to scare anyone. But for the next few weeks, he sat out on the porch every evening with his shotgun resting on his lap, just watching the woods. I don't know what that man really wanted. Maybe he really was lost. But something about the way he knocked on the back door instead of the front, the way he held his gun just low enough to not seem outright threatening, but high enough to be ready. I don't think he was just a lost hunter, and I think my grandpa knew it too. I once interviewed a woman who told me a story that still haunts me. Not because of what happened that night, but because of what came after. When she was 10, she had a hard time sleeping. She always had this weird feeling at night, like someone was watching her. Her closet was directly across from her bed, and she swore she could feel eyes on her from inside it. Every night, she'd end up running downstairs to tell her parents, convinced that the boogeyman was in there. Her father wasn't the kind of man to entertain what he thought was childish nonsense. He'd sigh, walk her back to her room, turn on the light, and tell her there was nothing there. Sometimes he'd open the closet, show her the hanging clothes, and shake his head. See, nothing. Go to bed. This went on for almost a week. She kept waking up in the middle of the night, feeling paralyzed with fear, staring at that closed closet door. She did not hear anything, but she knew something was wrong. When she ran to her parents, her father started getting frustrated, telling her she had to stop this nonsense and just sleep. Then, one night, she went down again, almost in tears, and her father finally had enough. He grumbled, got up, and stormed up the stairs, with her trailing behind. When they got to her room, he flipped on the light and said, "I'll prove to you once and for all that there's no boogeyman." He marched to the closet and grabbed the handle, but when he tried to pull it open, something held it shut from the other side. She told me the way his face changed was something she would never forget. The frustration disappeared, replaced with something she had never seen before. Pure, silent rage. He turned to her and, in the calmest voice, told her to go downstairs and lock herself in her parents' room. She did not even question him. She ran. From behind the door, she heard a crash, then yelling, then more crashing. She covered her ears and squeezed her eyes shut, shaking. She did not know how much time had passed, but eventually, she heard her mother's voice, then sirens. The police arrested the man who'd been in her closet. He had been sneaking into their house for days, hiding in there and watching her sleep. From what they pieced together, he had likely been getting in through the basement window, which did not lock properly. He'd come in late at night, slip upstairs, and just stand there in the dark. They found a small bag in the closet with him. It had a knife, rope, and a rag soaked in something. The cops told her parents it was a miracle she had been scared enough to keep waking them up. The man would not say a word to anyone. Not the police, not to the father, not even in court. Her father broke his nose and knocked out 2 of his teeth before the cops pulled him off. He did not regret it. The guy was sentenced to prison, and she spent years sleeping with her door locked, never fully feeling safe again. Fast forward to about a year ago. She's in her 30s now. One night, out of curiosity, she looked him up. She didn't even know why. Maybe she wanted closure, to know he was still locked away. But he wasn't. He had been released on parole, and then he had disappeared. Skipped his check-ins, vanished into thin air. There was a warrant out for his arrest, but they had no idea where he was. No family, no connections, just a man who once stood in her closet in the dead of night, watching her, and now he could be anywhere.